Tonight, in the aftermath of devastating flash floods, the massive search for survivors continues as Texas grapples with an immense tragedy.
I've lost 2 friends. We loved them, and they're gone.
The rising death toll and questions about how fast alerts were sent out to those in harm's way. And as the waters rushed in, stories of bravery and heroism.
I was running around, banging on RVs' doors, trying to get people to wake up and get out.
Plus, how prepared is Canada for catastrophic flooding?
On average, across the country, flood risk maps tend to be about 20 to 25 years out of date.
Why some are warning the time to act is now. An Australian woman found guilty of murdering family members with poisonous mushrooms.
If you and I were to eat 2 of those mushrooms, we'd have about a 50% chance of dying.
The trial that gripped a nation and the world.
From CBC News, this is The National with Christine Barak.
Thanks for joining us. Adrian is away. The number of dead in that horrific flood disaster in Texas is still climbing tonight. Nearly 4 days after torrential rains hammered parts of the state, suddenly spiking water levels in the Guadalupe River. We now know more than 100 lives were lost when those waters inundated homes and summer camps. Search crews are now arriving from outside Texas to help comb through the debris, trying to locate those still missing. It is an enormous and emotional operation that's been going on for days and will go on for days still. Katie Nicholson is in Kerrville, Texas tonight, one of the centers of the destruction. Katie.
Yeah, we're just outside a park here in the center of Kerrville, which of course is the center of this search and recovery effort. Behind me, the Guadalupe River has actually closed this park when it started to overflow its banks. And with every day since this Independence Day disaster, the hopes are really fading here of finding more survivors. Through the muck and muddy waters, the desperate search continues. A burden shared by emergency officials and Texans moved to do something, anything, to help.
It's just real dangerous. You know, you have snakes and other things, you know, but at the end of the day, we're trying to do whatever we can to make sure these kids get found and the ones who are missing. Those kids, girls as young as 8, were here at this camp when torrents of floodwater rushed through. Camp Mystic says it's grieving the loss of 27 campers and counselors. Among them, Linnie Ann McCown and twin sisters Hannah and Rebecca Lawrence of Dallas, who had just finished 2nd grade. The high water mark on the cabin walls etched in mud. The river tore through this RV park. Those who survived haunted by what they saw.
You could see the lights of vehicles getting washed off from upriver, and you can hear honking. You couldn't see anything, but you can hear honking and you can hear the screaming.
The mayor of Kerrville among those hit hard by this disaster.
I've lost 2 friends. We loved them, and they're gone. They're gone. Everyone here, if we could have warned them, we would have done so.
On that point, there has been criticism about the lack of warning about this disaster, especially for the most vulnerable. There will be lessons learned, Senator Ted Cruz promised.
Everyone would agree in hindsight, if we could go back and do it again, we would evacuate.
Accountability to come. But right now, what's needed most of all, help. In Sandy Creek, a community isolated by the floodwaters, this plea.
I know we're not Kerr County. I know we're not Kerrville. I know we're not San Angelo or San Antonio. But hell, we're human beings. Help us. Give us what we need. We don't want to be the stepchildren anymore.
And Christine, there is help coming from out of state, teams from Mexico, California, and Florida. And there is a growing need here for qualified professional search and recovery teams. And someone else is coming. Today, President Donald Trump confirmed he plans on visiting this region on Friday.
And Katie, so much is tough about the work happening there besides the terrain.
Right, it is very difficult to recover bodies in these kind of conditions, but beyond that, you have to try and identify some of these people. And just the violent power of this water, it often renders bodies unidentifiable, but it also rips away things that might have helped identify them, clothing, wallets, that sort of thing. So of the more than 100 confirmed dead, many are still unidentified.
Katie Nicholson reporting from Kerrville, Texas. Thanks for this, Katie. In Katie's story, you heard from the owner of an RV park where a family of 5 and dozens of RVs were swept away.
My husband and I, we're just working hard, trying to work to exhaustion so we can crash at night because we can get the screaming out of our head.
Later in the hour, we'll hear more from Lorena Guillen about those terrifying moments and her worries about what happens next. Heavy rains are causing concern in Quebec tonight. At Montreal's Trudeau International Airport, thunderstorms have forced some flights to be diverted, and authorities are keeping a close eye on waterways. Some areas in the provincial capital region have received more than 70 millimeters of rain. Streams are full and some roads are underwater. There are also reports of local flooding in the Laurentian Mountains northwest of Montreal, but so far, no reports of serious damage. Flooding is Canada's most common natural disaster. It is dangerous and it is costly. As Shayna Luck explains, experts say there is a lot of work to be done to mitigate the risks.
This widespread flooding in Nova Scotia in 2023 claimed the lives of 4 people and caused hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. The Sackville River, one of many that flooded. But as of this year, people who live along it can look to updated flood mapping to understand more about the risks.
Hooray! Hooray! Long overdue.
Walter Regan has been advocating for floodplain mapping and zoning for this river for 37 years.
We have baby seats for children. We have seat belts. The zoning, floodplain zoning, is a public protection measure that's cost effective and long overdue.
Floodplain zoning could prohibit new building in areas prone to flooding, but zoning and mapping is incomplete for most rivers in Canada.
On average, across Canada, flood risk maps are 20 to 25 years out of date.
Maps are the first step towards keeping people safe from flooding. Experts say investing in diverting the water and issuing warnings come next.
The thing about extreme events is even the morning of, you may not be able to predict the severity of that extreme event.
That includes disasters like the 2013 Alberta flooding, which displaced tens of thousands of people, and Toronto flooding last year that clogged the subway and a major highway. Canada doesn't have a national early warning system for flash floods. Rivers are provincial jurisdiction, and each province handles alerts differently, but they all face a similar challenge.
Sadly, it probably will get worse in the future. We need to adjust the way we live. We need to prepare for something big in every region.
Walter Regan is thinking now of hundreds of other rivers in his home province. He urges decision makers to move quickly to lessen the risks.
They say in the tree world, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now.
He believes it could save money and save lives. Shayna Luck, CBC News, Halifax.
While too much rain can be deadly, parts of Saskatchewan are suffering from not enough. Several communities are under a state of emergency tonight. As Alexander Silberman shows us, severe drought is putting farmers' livelihoods at risk.
Looking out at her bone-dry fields, Corrine Gibson is taking drastic measures to keep her cattle fed.
Nothing even started. Nothing grew.
With historic drought, killing crops normally turned into hay bales.
This spring has been the worst drought that we've lived through in our 33 years.
Pastures have dried up, leaving ranchers forced to buy feed elsewhere or sell their livestock. Gibson moved some of her cattle to greener land, 300 kilometers away.
We're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not closer to 1 million for us to replace all of that feed that we would normally produce ourselves.
4 Saskatchewan municipalities have now declared local states of emergency. In response, the province is lowering the threshold to claim crop insurance. The forecast for the prairies shows a hotter than usual summer, with uncertain levels of rainfall, and meteorologists say the lack of moisture is a trend.
The longer a drought goes on, the more likely it is to stay dry because the ground is just getting drier and drier throughout.
As persistent drought becomes a growing threat to farmers' livelihoods, some are finding solutions, rotating pastures, and planting crops that better absorb water.
That has saved our bacon this year. Even with good adaptation, these droughts are pretty tough things.
Amid the dirt and dust, Clayton Gibson is desperate for rain to salvage his fields.
If we don't get a lot of moisture this fall, I'm not sure we should plant a crop next spring.
Tough choice, but a new reality for many, as some ranchers question how many dry seasons lie ahead. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Regina.
In Washington tonight, all eyes are on the White House.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's an honor to have Bibi and Sarah with us.
U.S. President Donald Trump is hosting Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. There is a lot at stake, including Trump's push for a ceasefire in Gaza. Sasha Petrusik is watching it all, having covered the Middle East extensively for CBC News. So what do we know about the dinner?
Well, this is the third meeting they've had, and mostly it will be about negotiations to get some kind of a ceasefire in the Gaza war, perhaps even to end the war. Now, these negotiations have been going on in Qatar for some time. There doesn't seem to be any sign of a breakthrough. Israel still wants Hamas destroyed, and Hamas wants Israeli troops out of Gaza. But if you listen to U.S. President Donald Trump talk tonight, he certainly is sending out a very positive signal.
It saves a lot of work, but we had a great result recently, and we're going to have a lot of great results.
So that is the tone that he's setting before they actually start eating and talking.
Sasha, how would you sum up the mood at dinner?
Well, it does seem to be extremely optimistic. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was effusive in his praise of Donald Trump. In fact, he said that he was going to be nominating him for a Nobel Peace Prize, saying that Trump had changed the face of the Middle East. They, of course, spent a lot of time patting themselves on the back because of the attacks on Iran. And what Donald Trump says is basically getting rid of Iran's ability to have nuclear weapons. Those things were talked about. They actually seemed much more optimistic than one might think looking at the Middle East these days. Also very optimistic, as I said, about getting a deal very imminently now as far as Gaza is concerned.
Sasha Petrusik, thank you.
My pleasure.
Earlier in the day, Donald Trump sent letters to at least 14 world leaders laying out the tariff rates their exports will face if they don't reach trade deals with the U.S. soon.
I have the signed letters that went out to both South Korea and Japan today.
The rates range from 25% to more than 40%, but Trump also announced he's delaying their implementation to August 1st instead of a previous deadline of this Wednesday. Canada did not receive a letter today as it works towards a July 21st deadline to reach a deal. Canada's finance minister has also been sending out letters asking cabinet ministers to identify where program spending could be cut back in a big way. The target for next year is a 7.5% reduction, growing to 10% in 2027 and 15% in 2028. This isn't an order to make the cuts, but it is a signal. The new Carney government is keen to get spending under control. David Cochrane, host of Power and Politics, helped nail down those details for CBC News. David, tell us what you learned about how these cuts could roll out.
Well, it's important to note that these percentage spending reductions, these are identify the cuts, not implement the cuts, at least not right away. But the direction, the signal it sends is pretty clear that things will get leaner. And just as an example of how it's going to work for this budget coming up in the fall, is each department is told they can list 3 priorities and only 3 priorities, and they have to find a way to pay for those within the existing money they already have. So no big increases in spending, and the message is very clear to the ministers. The old ways of doing the budget are over. It's going to be leaner times ahead.
David, what's the larger message here about the Carney government's priorities?
Well, it's really clear that you can't make the big defense spending commitments they've made to meet the NATO targets, unleash the economic agenda they want, cut taxes for people that they did on Canada Day, and not find savings somewhere else. They're trying to reassure the civil service there's not going to be massive job cuts. They're saying this is a realignment, that any job reductions that happen are going to come through things like attrition when people either leave the job or retire, and other people could just, the jobs could be moved to another department, like defense, for example, which is a clear priority for this government. But it's a clear message to everybody, from a cabinet minister down to an office clerk, that change is coming, and get ready to move with a leaner, more efficient, and less costly federal government.
David Cochrane, thank you.
Thank you.
The premiers of Alberta and Ontario say they're joining forces to build trade infrastructure, including rail lines and pipelines.
People would love great Alberta oil, that love products, critical minerals from Ontario.
Doug Ford and Danielle Smith signed memorandums of agreement aimed at bringing critical minerals to Western Canadian ports and bringing Western energy east for refining and for export. Police associations in Ontario are addressing a problem that reaches right across the country, a declining number of officers per capita. Michelle Song now with how we got here and why some critics argue more officers may not lead to less crime.
Policing isn't just a job.
The associations that represent Ontario police officers are putting out the call for more recruits with a new campaign.
Answer the call.
If we don't become proactive and strategic in how we recruit people to this profession, then we will be at a crisis point.
Police. The initiative aims to widen the talent pool for more than 50 police forces to head off a future of staffing shortages.
To be representative of the diversity of our province, and that's a huge part of where we need to go and how we reform.
According to Statistics Canada, population growth has played a major role in reducing the ratio of police officers per 100,000 people. In 2023, it was 178, the lowest since 1970.
What they would be doing is a simulation of...
Durham Regional Police Service plans to hire more than 100 officers this year.
What we're hoping to do is really attract people within this region to policing, to demonstrate the amazing career that it is.
And crime rates had been falling, but since 2014, they've been inching back up.
More police officers doesn't necessarily guarantee more safety.
This expert says the focus should be on tackling the root issues driving crime.
If we look, for example, at other major metropolitan cities in North America that have higher per capita rates of police officers to citizens, what we find is that many of them also have higher rates of crime, violent crime, and homicides.
Ontario's Police Association says staffing shortages will affect response times and put too much strain on existing staff. So attracting the next generation of officers needs to start now. Michelle Song, CBC News, Toronto.
A conviction today for the Australian woman who killed her in-laws by serving them a deadly dish.
3 people have died, and we've had a person that nearly died and was seriously injured.
What we know about the poison mushrooms, which grow right here in Canada too, next. And later, a Saskatoon swimmer makes waves with an iconic voyage.
I was kind of hit with a really difficult tide. I was almost swimming in place for a few hours.
We're back in 2. Now to the murder case that is attracting international attention. An Australian woman could be facing life in prison after serving her in-laws poisonous mushrooms for lunch. Throughout the trial, Aaron Patterson insisted it was all a terrible accident. But as Jessica Chung explains, the jury did not believe her story.
Is there anything you'd like to say about the verdict?
A crush of media outside a courtroom in a normally sleepy Australian town when 12 jurors handed down their verdict. 50-year-old Aaron Patterson guilty of murdering family members by deliberately serving them poisonous mushrooms. After the verdict, a friend of Patterson's spoke to reporters briefly.
I didn't have any expectations. It's the justice system and it has to be what it is.
Since April, Crown prosecutors argued that Patterson had planned to kill 4 in her extended family in 2023, inviting them to her home under the false pretenses of discussing a cancer diagnosis and then serving them a beef Wellington dish laced with death cap mushrooms. 3 died. 1 survived, and he became a key witness in the trial, testifying that Patterson served each guest individually, but hers was on a different colored plate. During the trial, she claimed it was all a terrible accident.
I'm devastated. I love them. And I can't believe that this has happened, and I'm so sorry.
But prosecutors argued she deliberately foraged the death caps and was caught on camera disposing of a food dehydrator she used to prepare them.
As they expand, the stem comes up out of this round bottom shape here.
At the center of the case is the death cap mushroom. It's an invasive species in Australia and also Canada.
If you and I were to eat 2 of those mushrooms, we'd have about a 50% chance of dying.
The trial gripped Australians and thrust this small town outside of Melbourne into the international spotlight. The public packed the courtroom to watch the trial, providing a morbid boost to the local economy.
It's just been good that they've been able to come to our town and see what we have to offer.
Aaron Patterson is now facing life in prison. Jessica Chung, CBC News, Vancouver.
As the search continues for victims of the deadly flooding in Texas, stunning stories of survival are emerging.
I was running around, banging on RVs' doors, trying to get people to wake up and get out.
A first-person account of the dramatic race to safety from an RV park owner who stepped up to save others. Plus, faced with the effects of climate change, it's getting more and more difficult to determine your home's flood risk.
Flooding can come from a whole bit different sources, right? Extreme rain, like those atmospheric rivers themselves, groundwater.
Could you live in a flood zone and not even know it? And long considered an environmental champion, Guyana is changing gears after the discovery of massive oil reserves.
Everybody got really excited while the environmentalists shocked in their boots.
From net zero to petro-state, The National breaks down the stories shaping our world next. Britain's Prime Minister will host the French president this week. Expected on the agenda, an increasing number of migrants in England from France by boat. Briar Stewart shows us the lengths police are going to stop them.
In the shallows off the coast of northern France, migrants tried to cram onto a dinghy, watching what has become a routine and risky voyage. French officers and a team from BBC News. As it becomes overloaded and some, including a small child, are crowded near the propeller, officers move into the water. One pulls out a knife, slashing the boat. Migrant advocates say this routinely happens, but not on camera.
It's not really a surprise to see those kind of pictures and video just a few days before a meeting between France and UK.
France has been under pressure to do more to stop the migrants from crossing into the UK. As part of a 3-year deal, the UK gave France more than $800 million to step up security. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has repeatedly talked tough about stopping the crossings.
We've got to have a concerted effort to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
But in the past 6 months, UK government figures show around 20,000 migrants arrived by boat, a figure that's up 50% over the same period last year. In the last week alone, more than 2,000 crossed the channel in boats. Currently, French officers will only wade into the water to intercept the migrants if there's a danger to life. But France is considering allowing officers to go further from shore.
The reason that they've considered this change in maritime doctrine is because of this increasing use of taxi boats that are setting off further down the shore and loitering in shallow waters.
What to do about the channel crossings is expected to be a big part of the conversation this week during a state visit, which will see France's president meet with both the UK government and members of the royal family. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Now it's time to dig deeper into the stories shaping our world.
Texas is grieving right now.
After catastrophic flooding killed more than 90 people, including dozens, at an all-girls camp.
I've lost dear friends, best friends.
Tonight, we speak with an RV park owner about the moment floodwaters overtook campers.
He was yelling, "Please throw me your baby," and they couldn't.
But in the midst of the horror, tales of survival.
I wake up in the morning, I just hear screaming coming out from outside.
Several children's camps were damaged, but why was Camp Mystic so vulnerable? Camp Mystic was one of several camps that dotted the Texas riverside, but located where two rivers converged. Camp Mystic was at a higher risk of flooding. Eli Glasner takes a closer look at the camp's layout and the cabins most at risk.
A week ago, this was a time of great celebration. You're dropping your little girl off at camp.
A Christian summer camp for girls ages 7 to 17, Camp Mystic has been a fixture for Texans since 1926. The website touts the location nestled on the banks of the beautiful Guadalupe River. But it was that idyllic location that played a role in unimaginable heartbreak.
The hardest part was there was a little boy who started floating downstream, and he was screaming, asking for help, but there just wasn't anything anybody could do at that point.
It's a lot of destruction. Most of the camps are gone.
The newest group of campers, 750 in total, arrived a week ago. The campgrounds are located in central Texas, about an hour and a half from San Antonio, 10 kilometers downstream from where the two forks of the Guadalupe River converge. The camp website shows two locations. Many of the campers that are missing or killed in the floods are believed to be from the Guadalupe River site. The cabins for campers were split into two areas. Senior campers were further from the river in a slightly more elevated location called Senior Hill. The other group of cabins was for junior and intermediate campers. This area, known as the Flats, was less than 150 meters from the river that would overflow its banks. Early Friday morning, the National Weather Service issued a series of flash flood warnings for the region. At 5:34 local, there was a warning for communities along the Guadalupe River. Residents and campers should seek higher ground now. Life-threatening flash flooding along the river is expected. That Friday morning, the river rose nearly 8 meters in 45 minutes. This isn't the first camp in the area to pay a devastating price for flash floods. In July of 1987, a summer storm caused the Guadalupe River to rage. Caught in the torrents, the Pot of Gold summer camp, located just 60 kilometers from Camp Mystic. 10 teenagers died, but then, as now, the community responded, with even a local news helicopter pitching in to rescue stranded campers.
Just northeast of Camp Mystic, on the banks of the Guadalupe, is the Blue Oak RV Park. The owner, Lorena Guillen, leapt into action when the flooding hit. We spoke earlier from the wrecked RV park, and just a heads up, her cell reception is a little spotty. Lorena, I appreciate you making time for us. Take us back to Friday morning.
I was awakened by the rescue team lights that were called by one of my residents because they were, he heard people screaming for help, so he called 911. So my husband and I ran down to the RV, and at that point, water was already about 10 feet high, and I had a family trapped in the water. The father was trying to come back to higher grounds, and my husband got into the water to try to rescue them. He was waist deep into the water. He kept telling the father, "Throw me your baby, throw me your baby." And then a big wave came in, and it took him and my husband too. But thankfully, he was very close to the edge where the ground was, and he was caught by something in his arm, and he was able to get out. But the family was not. The rescue team was here, and they were trying to do everything they could to save the family. But the water was getting higher and higher so fast. It was chaos. I was running around, banging on RVs doors, trying to get people to wake up and get out and run up to higher ground. There was no time to jump into your vehicles. There was no time to grab your belongings. So everybody lost everything. It's just unreal what we went through. And at the same time, you could see cars floating, floating from the upper river with the lights on, and you can hear honking, and then you can hear banging on the windows of the cars, and you can see people inside their vehicles. At the same time, the cabins from next door, they were floating into us, and they were getting smashed against the windows. And the screaming from the people inside the cabins was just so incredible. Oh, it was horrible, absolutely horrible.
It just sounds absolutely devastating, Lorena. It is incredible that you managed to get so many people out of their RVs. And those stories are obviously staying with you. When the sun did come up and then you saw the extent of the damage, what did you see?
Total devastation. Everything was gone. My septic tank is gone. I mean, buried deep down. My 200-year-old trees uprooted completely and gone. There were the cabin frames wrapped around trees. It was just. I mean, it looked like a war zone.
Lorena, you and your community have been through so much in the last few days. How are you doing?
My husband and I, we're just working hard, trying to work to exhaustion so we can crash at night, because we can get the screaming out of our head. And by working and being productive and helping along with our community and our friends, that keeps us busy and keeps us from thinking about that night. We just need to keep on thinking and moving forward and trying to rebuild this one of the most beautiful areas in the country.
Well, I can understand why you want to do everything you can. Lorena, thank you very much for making time for us. Our thoughts are with you and your community. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much. Have a blessed day.
The Texas flood was called a 1-in-100-year event. But what does that really mean? Johanna Wagstaff explains the probability and why determining flood risk, including here in Canada, isn't always straightforward.
How worried are you about flooding? Because you could be living in a flood zone and not even know it. There are flood maps you could check, but not all of them are up to date, detailed, or account for all the different ways your home could flood. And older buildings may not have the same building codes as new ones. Here's how to figure out and understand the flood risks in your area. The thing is, it's kind of complicated. This is the River District in Vancouver. And if you were to search for the flood risk here, you'd probably end up with this map. But not every municipality in BC or Canada has a map that's up to date or as detailed as this one.
So when we look elsewhere in the province, like flooding can come from a whole bit of different sources, right? Extreme rain, like those atmospheric rivers, rivers themselves, groundwater. And so when we do this flood mapping, there's a whole bunch of different information that cities have to pull from. And so maps are going to look different because of that. It's going to look different because of the local geography and hydrology, and also, yes, the historic record of flooding in that area.
So let's say you find your map in whatever form it takes. What do the numbers mean? Okay, let's go back to the river district. So flood hazard is often expressed in terms of the likelihood of a given flood event occurring. The areas in red are where we would see a major 1 in 500 year event. That does not mean that the size of flood will only happen once every 500 years. It actually means there is a 0.2% chance of a flood that size happening in any given year. So if you're in a 1 in 200 year floodplain, that means a 0.5% chance in any given year. 1 in 100, 1% chance, and so on. So yeah, sometimes a 1 in 100 year flood can happen 2 years in a row. So why don't flood maps show all these flood risks, all the different probabilities?
It's interesting, like Vancouver, we're a rainy city. Where are our maps? So engineering is actually mapping those risks now. Because of climate change, we are seeing more flooding due to rain in the city of Vancouver. And so we hope to make that information available in the next year or so.
These maps take a lot of time and resources to produce. And climate change is stacking the deck in favor of these flood events happening more often. Also, and you knew there was an also, the flood risk changes each time there is a flood. The maps need to get readjusted to account for changes in the river channel and floodplain itself. So in the UK or the Netherlands, you can just type in your street address and get a very clear picture of what your flood risk looks like. Now, the UK is a lot smaller than Canada, but collaboration has started here. Until then, take a moment to Google and understand your current flood risk.
Statistics Canada says as of 2024, 80% of Canadian cities were located in a flood zone. It has the rare distinction of being a net zero carbon emitter, but now rainforest-covered Guyana is experiencing an oil boom.
The opportunity we have right now is an opportunity of a lifetime.
Guyana's bumpy journey from climate champion to the Dubai of South America. That's next. Guyana is the newest global oil frontier, but navigating its emerging petrostate status and its unique net zero reputation is now the challenge.
Everybody got really excited while the environmentalists shock in their boots.
Kyle Bax recently visited the South American country undergoing an oil revolution, but the newfound wealth brings its own set of fears.
Perched near the top of South America, rainforest-covered Guyana is a brand new player in the oil business.
I don't think there is any other place in the world that is going through what Guyana is at the moment.
An environmental champion, a rare net zero emission nation, is now the world's latest petrostate.
Everybody got really excited while the environmentalists shock in their boots.
A rare opportunity for prosperity paired with worries for the future.
It cannot be an oil and gas driven economy only. We will go downhill.
No matter where you go in Guyana, every town, village, and city is a construction zone. Roads and bridges, hospitals and hotels, industrial and residential developments. Semi-trucks drive around the clock, delivering rock and sand to job sites throughout the nation. The entire South American country booming.
20 years ago, our economy was struggling to survive. We were barely feeding ourselves. The opportunity we have right now is an opportunity of a lifetime. We as Guyanese should all capitalize on those opportunities.
There's a plethora of work for construction companies like his, but there is a shortage of workers.
And that's one of the reasons why you see wage and salary keep going up, because we're poaching from one another. It's a small pool, and we're all trying to take from that little pool.
The oil bounty is large for such a small country, the population less than 1 million. The struggle is to not squander the wealth. Instead, tackle the lengthy to-do list of overcoming poverty, improving education, and saving for the future too.
If you have all the wealth and you have an abundance of wealth and it's not managed properly, definitely you can go right down to ground zero.
Guyana has the fastest growing economy in the world for 5 years in a row, jumping by 44% last year alone. This oil company growing and hiring rapidly.
It's really wonderful. I don't think there is any other place in the world that is going through what Guyana is at the moment. So we see a lot of companies wanting to do business in Guyana. Local businesses are also thriving. So it's a very positive business environment at the moment.
Along the way, many growing pains persist. Rising prices for supplies, non-stop construction, and gridlock on the roads.
Because the danger of the people on the roadside with the motorbike and the taxi and things like those things.
This summer, construction will begin to make this a 4-lane highway.
They have to take more caution on the roadside.
The oil jackpot is often considered a blessing, but for others, it's more of a curse. Guyana's unique status as a net zero country at risk.
And then the moment oil is discovered, then what?
Yes, and then everybody got really excited while the environmentalists shock in their boots. So you had a mixed views. The person saw it as a blessing. We're going to finally be rich. We're going to be the Dubai of the Caribbean.
And Guyana is dealing with another contradiction. With most of its tiny population on the coast, this emerging petrostate is profoundly at risk from climate change.
In a blink of an eye, it's going to be upon us. And if you look at the way the climate has been changing, it's going to happen. Persons that are watching it are going to see it's going to happen.
At a training college in a rural part of the country, all of the students here already have a job in the oil industry. The campus is expanding as demand for skilled workers continues.
Remember, Guyana has never had an oil and gas industry. So we're starting from scratch, zero.
ExxonMobil is the dominant player in Guyana and hires partners to operate these massive production and storage vessels.
There's a total of 3 vessels that we operate and maintain.
Martin Chung is a rarity, a local Guyanese who is leading one of those companies. The oil patch and the environment, he says, are not in conflict.
What we do in terms of impact to the environment is at most minimal, or at least zero.
The struggle continues between optimism and concern for Guyana's future.
Scientists have shown that by 2030, the entire coastline, which includes Georgetown, would be under water. Will be flooded. And they have projections.
Back at the college, the director on campus has lived in many oil-producing countries, including Canada. His hope is that Guyana can prosper too, all sectors, without leaving anyone behind.
How do you try to equilibrate that so that everyone feels they're getting a fair share of this? You can see how this can be transformative for Guyana, providing we keep our eyes on the ball that it has to be a sustainable economy. It cannot be an oil and gas driven economy only. We will go downhill.
Since Kyle's report first aired, ExxonMobil has stepped up exploration off Guyana's coast. But last month, the government said no new agreements would be signed until after elections in the fall. Next, a 16-hour trek across the English Channel.
You're just kind of absorbing what you're doing and trying not to get stung by jellyfish.
How a Saskatchewan woman swam from England to France in our moment. That's Erin Bowers from Saskatoon, pictured here on the coast of France after swimming for hours on end across the English Channel. It wasn't all smooth sailing, but tonight the stamina and determination that it took to get her to the finish line makes our moment.
Go, Erin, go!
The English Channel is really the pinnacle of open water swimming. It's a very, very challenging body of water. I swam somewhere between 40 and 50 kilometers. I started on a beach that's just outside Dover called Ceasefire. And at the beginning, it was dark. At that point, you're just kind of absorbing what you're doing and trying not to get stung by jellyfish. It started to become really difficult, about 4 hours. away from reaching France. I was kind of hit with a really difficult tide. I was almost swimming in place for a few hours, and eventually the shore just got closer and closer. And finally, I was able to stand up and walk onto the beach. I was just really excited and elated and proud of myself. And there were really nice French people on the beach that congratulated me. It was 16 hours and 33 minutes and 34 seconds.
Just incredible. Bowers has been a long-distance swimmer her entire life and considers the Channel swim to be the most iconic in the sport. She joked that she's half woman, half fish because she doesn't like to go too long without being in the water. Quite an achievement. From all of us here at The National, thank you for being with us. I'm Christine Burak. Take care.